Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello and welcome to episode 9. Today I'm speaking with Ali Foxon. Ali is a geographer, an artist, and the creator of Boggy Doodles, a platform through which she introduces people to the joys of green sketching, a whole new way of bringing together art and nature. Ali talks about her background in academia and climate change research, and how she's now circled back round to the joy of art that she knew in her early years. Hi Ali, thank you so much for being here.
Hi Bethan, it's a pleasure to be here.
I don't know you in person, but I feel like I know you because we have had a lot of interaction online, and I think you and I have a lot of similarities in our personality and definitely in our mission, our life's work.
Yeah, I completely agree. When we connected last year after the TED Talk, there was so many similarities in our background, our values, and it's amazing how you can connect with someone over Instagram and form quite a strong friendship. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And so I wonder if we can start right at the very beginning. I'm thinking about your childhood and whether or not you had nature in your childhood.
Yes, I did, and I totally took it for granted. I grew up with woods and fields all around me and thought that was completely normal. It was only later that I realised having bluebell woods at the bottom of your garden isn't particularly normal.
Wow.
We had lots of simple family holidays, outdoors, camping, got dragged up all the sort of British hills and mountains. And it was just a way of life, really, very, very outdoorsy. My parents didn't teach us nature, but they exposed us to lots of nature. Lots of the free play that we now talk about a lot of the sort of absence in childhood. So I was very lucky, yeah.
That is so cool. And then you went to university and you studied geography?
Yes. So at school, I liked all subjects. I was a pretty academic child, and I did actually like art a lot, but I wasn't allowed to do A-level because I was too academic. Back then, my parents thought it would distract me, which is quite ironic.
You've come full circle.
I did. I came full circle. So the other thing I was interested in was the outdoors and nature. So I went off and studied geography and ended up getting 3 degrees and not doing anything artistic for years and years and years, and going down an environmental science route. And it felt a bit like an academic funnel, that the more specialised you got, the more sort of focused you got, and the more sort of qualifications you got, the more you spent time indoors, actually, which is ironic.
Yes, that's funny. And one of your degrees, your research master's, was in geochronology, and I've never heard of this. Can you tell me about it?
Oh gosh, yes, I haven't talked about geochronology for years. So it's, most people have heard of radiocarbon dating. So it's using indicators to date sediments and rocks and things from the past, and you can use it to understand how the environment has changed over much longer timescales. So I was actually using something called optical stimulated luminescence to date sand grains to work out how river environments had changed over thousands of years. So yes, very techie stuff, very lab-based. Yeah. And looking back, I think it was a classic example of falling down an academic funnel and getting so niche. And perhaps just because you can do something doesn't mean you always should do it. And it took me a while to realise that it took an awful lot of effort to sort of keep up with some of the sort of lab-based science. And it wasn't always enjoyable. It was intellectually rewarding, but not necessarily joyful. Although I did like the fieldwork. I did always love the fieldwork. So yeah.
And later you completed a PhD investigating the role of nature conservation in mitigating climate change?
Yes, so that was, back then it was quite an exciting, innovative PhD. So there was a group of UK conservation organisations, and they co-funded it because they wanted to understand the impact of their conservation land use management, really, on carbon that was stored in the soils and the vegetation. So almost to sort of know what they were contributing in terms of carbon emissions or creating carbon sinks, not in terms of having a massive impact on the global climate, but just understanding what was happening and understand what good practice would be. So I looked at different habitats, peat bogs, mixed woodland, heathland, salt marshes, those sort of things, just to work out what the different sort of carbon consequences of the different behaviours conservation management was. So it was interesting work. It was quite policy relevant, but again quite indoor desk-based work. It was a bit of a pattern that took me a long time to realise.
Yeah, and you've actually found yourself as a climate change advisor to very, very influential people. And then you had a bit of an epiphany, and I think it was to do with this about reports and numbers and all this stuff. Can you tell me about the epiphany that you had?
Yes, so it was several years later. I was living in Switzerland, and I'd had my son. He was a very young baby who wasn't sleeping at all, and I was trying to juggle it with a little bit of work, and I was working as a scientific editor with the UN on some interesting reports, and I was just sat in a meeting, and it was one of those meetings that when I was a younger researcher, I would have loved, it just felt so exciting. There were such exciting, important people there. And it didn't get more sort of exciting. I mean, it was a research meeting, but it didn't get more exciting. And yet I just realised that I just felt sort of claustrophobic in this sort of grey, airless meeting room, and just realised it wasn't the right fit for me. And it did lead to this sort of slight crisis of confidence of like, well, I've spent so long studying, and if I can't be happy sat with some of the most influential scientists in the UN working with the UN, well, what is going to make me happy? And it's not that I didn't believe in the science, but it was just this moment of, I need to do something different, and I'm not sure what.
So a career break was in order.
Yes. And looking back, I'm sure sleep deprivation had a massive part to play, because my son was born a bit premature, and he had colic and digestive problems, so he just didn't sleep at all. And so I spent an awful lot of time outdoors with him, because the only place he'd occasionally nap was being pushed around outdoors, whatever the weather. And it forced me to spend time outdoors and get that fresh air I'd been craving. And that's when I started sketching on a whim, just as something to do to distract me from staring at my phone all the time, because it was lonely. It was, there's only so many hours that you can just walk up and down by yourself.
Yes. And
so I just wanted something to occupy myself. So I thought I'd try it, because I had been artier as a child, and it was just amazing. It was pretty instant that I thought, this just keeps me quiet. This settles my mind. This is making me see things that I hadn't noticed, even though I've been here so many times before. So it all happened in Switzerland.
Having a new baby, this is another thing we have in common, which is that I have a young son too, and he was absolutely sleepless for a long time. And I'm lucky because I have family very close around me, and I had a lot of help and a lot of helpers, and yet I was at sea, with sleeplessness. It's just terrible. But doing this with your baby very young, and doing it by yourself in another country, it must have been pretty full on.
It was full on, and it was that lack of support network. We didn't have anyone to babysit, and my husband was often away for 3, 4, 5 nights, so it was proper 24-hour care. As any new parent will know. It's pretty full on. So I realised I had to find my own way to cope. I suppose that was the essence of it. I thought, if I don't do something to sort of keep myself sane, I'm really going to be quite vulnerable to slumping into something more serious here. And so I knew I had to look after my mental health. And I was aware creativity was supposedly good for you, and I loved being outdoors. And so the combination of it was a tiny little sketchbook, but it just was something for me, because motherhood is all consuming at that stage, and it was just something I could do for me. And quite quickly I noticed, hang on a minute, there's a lot of benefits here. This is really good. And at that time, I think I was just I wasn't worried, because I wasn't sharing it with anyone.
Yes.
I hadn't got into that whole sort of fear of judgment and whether it was good enough. And that sort of issue sort of cropped up later. But yeah, so that's how I started.
And then you realised, this is so good for me, maybe it will be good for other people. Was that how the transition happened? How did you go from doing it just for you to thinking this could be something beneficial to other people?
Well, initially the sketching sort of gradually led into more proper art, I suppose. I started doing a bit more painting and selling some of my artwork. But at the same time, because I'd never sort of switched off my research brain, I became aware of this emerging research into nature connection and this idea that traditionally we've always tried to engage people by educating them about nature and teaching them how to identify plants and animals. And it's always been about acquiring knowledge. But the emerging research was actually, it's perhaps more effective to try to sort of engage people through their emotions and to get some, some sort of connect with the heart rather than the head through emotional engagement. And one of the pathways to do this is sort of through appreciation of beauty. And that was when I started to sort of join up all these dots and go, oh, hang on a minute, that's what I was doing. And just started to realise my own personal experience had been reconnecting with nature and that it had had benefits for my own well-being. And I thought, well, this is a really simple way that we can help people. If I can just start sketching, and we're just talking simple sketches, what if other people were able to do this? And how many boxes can we tick in one go if we can sort of help people reconnect with nature? And there's emerging evidence that reconnecting with nature is linked with pro-environmental behaviour. And if we can also help people feel better, then it's sort of win-win-win.
Yes. And
so that's when I started to realise this had potential for other people too. And it felt more meaningful. I mean, I love my fine artwork, but I wanted to do something more meaningful, and I wanted to bring the art and the science together, I suppose.
So when you realised that this feeling could benefit other people, you founded Boggy Doodles, which is your company. I just love this name. And you also created a whole new genre of sketching outdoors. Can you talk about green sketching, which is a whole new area that you have created yourself?
Yes. Okay. So when I realised the benefits of sketching outdoors for myself and realised that it had huge potential, I wondered, well, how come not that many people are doing it? And I started to look into, beyond the small art groups, why aren't more people sketching outdoors? And started chatting to people and researching it a little bit. And it quite quickly became apparent that there are these three barriers, and they're all psychological, they're all in our head, they're all mindset related. But so many people assume you have to be good at drawing to have a go at sketching. Mm-hmm. So many people assume you have to have loads and loads of time to sit down and spend an hour and a half doing something beautiful in a sketchbook. And a lot of people also think you have to know the name of something that you're sketching. You have to have that sort of specialist knowledge. And if you combine those three barriers, they're pretty potent, and it's easy to see why people just avoid it unless you feel confident, or unless you have access to people nearby who can demonstrate that those assumptions are all wrong.
Yes.
And I looked into all the different genres of sketching, and this is again just from personal sort of experience, but I just kept finding, whether it was urban sketching, which I loved, but for obvious reasons it focuses on architecture, but I love the ethos of it, but it was too urban, which sounds really silly, but it was there was so much I loved about the community and the ethos of urban sketching. And then I looked into nature journaling, and I was like, this is going to be my home, this is going to be what I want. But then I thought, I feel a bit of a fraud because I've never kept a nature journal. I've never had the discipline to keep a careful nature journal. And I went on a workshop once with a specialist wildlife artist and came away feeling disheartened because he was criticising the fact I'd got the angle of the kingfisher beak wrong.
Oh dear.
And the sort of emphasis on accuracy, combined with my scatty brain and inability to keep a careful, consistent sketchbook, just made me think, well, if I feel like that, I'm already sort of sketching and doodling every day, albeit in a sort of haphazard way, then there's something missing here. And I looked at botanical drawing and mindful drawing, and in the end I decided I wanted to sort of steal the best bits of each genre and just come up with something that was very accessible for beginners, that it could be a stepping stone for people who wanted to carry on with nature journaling once they'd got their confidence, but it was just an entry point. And I fairly unoriginally decided that green sketching was a sort of opposite of urban sketching, and it's just taken off from there, really. So I sort of took the best bits of all of these different sketching approaches and just decided to focus on, I suppose it was three things. I really wanted to focus on the process, to get away from the idea that it had to be a perfect picture, and really to focus on the process, so much so that I didn't want to demonstrate a particular way, because that automatically set up there's a right way and a wrong way, or there's your way and I'm not doing it your way, therefore it's the wrong way. I just wanted to focus on everybody's individual process of enjoying the observation, not the creation on paper. And I wanted it to be about the joy. That was the key thing, was to be about experiencing that moment of joy, that joyful connection, not about learning, because I find that the curiosity follows the joy. So the knowledge will come when it's ready, but if you focus on the knowledge first, then you can remove the joy. And the last one was, I suppose, to not take it too seriously, to just make it fun and to call it a doodle and to make it quick and messy and sketchy. And there's plenty of space and capacity to create beautiful journal spreads later if you want to, but you have to find a way to start. You have to get over that sort of barrier first. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the word doodle because a guest of mine on the podcast earlier said that she was part of Urban Sketches, and the fact that they called it a sketch, it helped her to feel relaxed. And I'm guessing that the choice of words was really deliberate to say Boggy Doodles, because a doodle is something you do while you're on the phone talking to someone. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be serious. And can you talk about naming Boggy Doodles?
Yes, absolutely. You're so right, because the word sketch feels less intimidating than drawing, but the word doodle feels far less intimidating than even
Definitely.
Sketch. If you asked a room full of 100 adults, let alone children, but if you asked a room full of 100 adults who can draw, you'd get maybe five hands would go up confidently, a few more might go half-heartedly. If you asked a room full of 100 adults who can doodle, I suspect like nearly all of the room would go, oh, everybody can do it.
Yeah, that's great.
It's such a powerful word because it you can't judge a doodle. There's no such thing as a bad doodle, and it just frees people up to sort of make squiggles, and the squiggles might turn into representational drawing, but it doesn't matter if they stay as squiggles.
Yeah, so good. And I love that I've seen you say, like, if you want to do a symbol, that's fine. If you want to do a stick figure, that's fine. And I've seen you speaking about it, and you said the quality of the sketch is irrelevant. And I just thought this word irrelevant was just so good because, in nature journaling, I come up against this fear in adults all the time. And we definitely like try to de-emphasize making art. But this word irrelevant just completely obliterates the need to make something perfect. And I think that's what stands green sketching apart from everything else, is that it's about joy. It's about moving your pen around on the page just for fun.
Absolutely. It's about using drawing purely as a tool to see and experience joy. That's what I think it's about.
I have this question that I sometimes ask people, and it is, do you nature journal from the head or the heart? And I can tell without asking you this question that it's all heart-centered for you. Would that be true?
Yeah, completely. And it's been, I think that's probably the crux of why I've been doing this over the last 10 years or so, because I grew up in a family that prized knowledge and logic above all else, and took me on an academic path, and something was missing, and it was this sort of gradual reconnection, not only with nature but sort of creativity, that I realised I cared how things made me feel, and I cared about things with my heart, not with my head. And for a long time, I felt a bit embarrassed about this. I felt embarrassed that I was more interested in how things looked and how they functioned when I was sort of learning about nature. It was a sort of quiet secret. But then I realised that it's actually what drives us all, really. It's what drives human behaviour. So we shouldn't be embarrassed about it. And some people are driven by curiosity and the acquisition of knowledge. And I think that's fantastic, but there's nothing to be ashamed of. You can be driven purely by the heart. And if that's what triggers you to care about nature and to want to take care of it, then go for it and embrace it.
I find this so fascinating because you're such a person with dual. You spent your life in academia. You were at the highest level of your field at the point when you had this epiphany. You spent your career in a field where everything is cerebral, and now you've jumped ship and you're living completely from the heart, and you're running this business, teaching people how to feel close to nature.
And what's so interesting at the moment is it's coming full circle, because academia are now interested in, we need to find new ways to help people connect with nature. We need to find ways to, really sort of make, change the way that we communicate. And so I've been invited to a workshop in November, which is sort of an incredibly academic workshop where I've got to present to academics about this potential new way of nature communication, which is just funny, really. So it's yes, there's a whole lesson there about just sort of being ourselves, isn't it? And following what's true to you, and realizing that nothing is wasted. All these different elements of our past and experience all find a way out in the end. They will become useful.
Yeah, totally. And now you run Boggy Doodles, and you take people out into nature and you help them access this feeling and tap into their artistic selves.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding and fascinating to see people just experiencing wonder with the absolute everyday weeds, everyday nature that's been on their doorstep for the last, well, for some people decades, and they've just never noticed it before.
Yeah, you have this little resource about doodling a dandelion, and I think that's just so cute. That a dandelion is something people walk past regularly and don't give a second thought to, but you encourage people to stop and look at the dandelions.
Yes, well, I mean, in lockdown, obviously we've all been impacted by lockdown in different ways, and I wasn't able to run the sessions, so I was trying to come up with some online resources, and it was dandelion season. And it was just so popular. It was brilliant. And I've got another one at the moment that's just about noticing trees, because it doesn't matter which corner of the world you're in, there'll be some trees of some sort somewhere, and just seeing what's on your doorstep, because a lot of people worry that you have to go far out into the wild, and I'm lucky to live in a very beautiful part of the world, but there's some nature on your doorstep wherever you are. You just have to open your eyes and see it.
Yeah. And so you do sessions with people of all ages. You do sessions at schools, and you also do sessions with adult groups and corporate groups. And I'm wondering if you notice a difference in the age groups. Like, do you still see that sort of drawing fears and resistance in children, or have they not reached that point yet?
It's interesting, because there's a point probably around 8 or 9 when children do start getting more self-conscious. And one of the reasons that the Boggy Doodles has been so popular is because I think the children are so used to being taught how to do things that they expect that they're going to be taught how to draw. And when they're given permission to go off and find their own things to sketch in their own way, and I always tell them that you don't have to show me if you don't want to, and you don't have to show anyone else. It makes you realise how much they're weighed down by fear of judgment normally, because it's very liberating for them, and they usually react with great enthusiasm and do want to show and share, but not having to is one of the secrets to then relaxing. And adults definitely come with huge hang-ups. Every adult that I've ever had has been nervous about, very keen to tell me that they can't draw, just to make that clear at the beginning of the session. And then as soon as they realise that they don't have to share it with anyone, they completely relax. So it's an unusual approach to drawing, and it's not necessarily an easy one to spread on social media, because sometimes social media is all about sharing beautiful artwork and sharing beautiful images.
Yes.
And so trying to tell people, start green sketching, but you don't have to show me your sketches, and you don't have to share your sketches. It's a hard message because I want to get people off the screens. I don't want people to be on social media, but I want to foster a community that people feel that they can have a go, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. So that's an ongoing challenge.
And one of the things that is beautiful about both nature journaling and green sketching, and I assume urban sketching as well, is that when you commit time to observing something closely and feeling your way through the landscape where you are, it really cements memories. And you talk about that especially your early sketches have memories attached to them, and one of the memories you said you had there was the sleeplessness. And I would just imagine you looking at those early sketches and just feeling back there like, the sleep deprivation is attached. No, but I just love that sketching and green sketching and nature generally has this ability to cement memories, and that's a really powerful and wonderful reason to do it as well, I think.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I found that the difference, because I take loads of photos as well, but the difference between looking at an old photo and looking at an old sketch, even the sketches that you didn't finish, even the ones that at the time you might have gone, oh, I don't like that one, but they evoke such strong memories afterwards.
Yes.
That you remember, you really do remember what you were doing, and all the little conversations that you might have had at that moment, and how your son interrupted you or nearly knocked the coffee over the sketchbook, and all sorts of little things. And so I think particularly for holidays, but just any important moment, anything you want to cement, it's amazing how powerful sketching is actually as a memory tool.
Yeah.
Probably one that's got much more potential to be used actually for the older population. But,
yes, good point. I've been thinking a lot about nature journaling with senior citizens and what a beautiful thing it would be to access people in aged care that may be lonely, or I think loneliness is a pandemic in itself, and I just think that sketching nature would be so therapeutic for people in that group.
No, I agree actually. I think it's not talked about so much, but I think it can, a close connection with nature can make you feel less alone, can't it? Because it gives you company in a different way. It makes you feel part of something bigger. But just I remember that. I remember that from my early years in Switzerland, that sense of isolation, you could just sort of block it out when you were sort of noticing the birds and the wildlife around you. You just sort of you felt like you had company from a different source.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that sort of looked into more as a proper intervention.
So you had your career break, you realised this is going to be your future, you're going to connect people with nature, you invent green sketching, and then in 2019 you do something super brave, because I know that I know you're an introvert and you have a fear of public speaking, and yet you put all that aside and you stood on the stage and did a TEDx talk about green sketching. Can you tell me about that, how it was for you, what was the process like, and how you overcome this fear because you want to spread this beautiful message?
I think it was a classic example that the message really was greater than the fear, but only just. And a friend recommended that I put myself forward for it, and I have a tendency to sometimes just jump for these things and then work out how I'll do it later. And so when I was actually accepted, I began a very lengthy 5-6 month process of preparation, and the team were absolutely fantastic in structuring the rehearsals. But it was an awful lot of effort, and a huge amount of effort, because you had to memorize the talk. And I know that when I'm speaking, when I get nervous, my memory tends to fail me. So it was a double whammy of the fear and the memory. But I put the hours in, I worked very hard, and somehow managed to do it.
You must have been so proud afterwards. That's just And the talk is beautiful and inspiring, and you don't come across nervous at all. You maybe it did take over. Did you feel like the message was taking over during the talk, or were you just...
No, I was absolutely terrified.
It doesn't come across.
No, I'd love to tell you that I was in some flow state, but I was absolutely terrified because being videoed, having to deliver a talk and remember I had to do the slides myself as well, so I had to remember where the slides were without any laptop to look at, so I just had to remember where to click in the right place.
Oh wow.
And I think it was just a challenge, to be honest. I think I knew it was such a long shot that I was up for a big challenge, but it was very empowering. So if anybody's listening and thinks, oh, I could never do that, I mean, trust me, if I can do it, anybody can. But it really was driven by a desire to get the message out there.
Yes.
Because the TEDx platform is so powerful. So I just thought it was too good an opportunity.
Did you get a good response from it when it came out?
I did. It was worth the effort. I did. It's been fantastic. It's led to some very exciting opportunities, so it's been really good.
I'm wondering what nature looks like where you are. You talked about Bluebell Woods and the nature of your childhood. Are you in the same place?
No. So I'm now living a bit further north in England, not far from Manchester, but on the edge of the Peak District, which is a national park. And it's characterised by upland habitats, peat bogs, blanket bog, moorland, heather moorland, rocky outcrops. It's not that high, but it's just a very beautiful space, and it's I love it. I absolutely love it here. We're very lucky to live so close. So in lockdown, we were able to just walk out the door and have these fantastic walks, and just felt it was a different sort of wealth and richness that we always appreciated, but appreciate even more now.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about your particular love of boggy environments.
Well, I studied them earlier in my first geography degree, and then in my PhD, and used to get teased for being so fascinated by bogs and peat bogs, and they're an amazing environmental archive of information, and they're such an important carbon store.
And are they very threatened now?
Yes, they are, and they're vulnerable to moorland fires and to just erosion and degradation. But they're also just beautiful environments too, and a lot of people think that they're bleak. But if you're ever lucky enough to see cotton grass blowing on the sort of blanket bog around here, it's just a magical sight. It's the subtle colours of the sort of upland moorlands are just beautiful. So it's the combination of knowing how important they are and how beautiful they are. So I'm a big fan of boggy environments.
Is your son a boggy doodler as well?
He was when he was younger. And he likes to tell me he does a little bit now. But I would love to say he did it every day, but I'm fighting against the forces of Minecraft and
yes.
Yeah. Well, what I am grateful for is he's still extremely observant and interested in looking at nature. So ultimately that's the goal, I think, for me, for green sketching, is to get people to look and appreciate nature. And he spots things that other people miss. So he'll notice a particular bird high up in a tree, or he'll notice a quirky shape in the clouds in the sky, and he gets pleasure and joy from noticing things. So I'll make do with that for now.
Are you able to articulate what the feeling is inside you? Is it love? Is it calm? Is it presence? What can you name that feeling that you get when you're outside?
It's a combination, actually. I've realised that the reason it's so special is when I'm out doodling in nature, I'm calm because of the environment I'm in. I find nature calms me, but it also elicits joy. So spotting something unusual, beautiful, colourful, whatever it might be, sparks joy. And the combination of creating calm and sparking joy is what helps regulate my emotions. And the more I realise that when you become aware that that's the consequence of popping out for a quick doodle, you realise you can use it sort of proactively. So if you're really grumpy or stressed or anxious or grieving, actually knowing I know how to create calm, I know how to find joy is incredibly powerful. It feels like it's a sort of, well, it is, I've said before, it's like part of a mental first aid kit.
Yes.
Because it never ceases to work, you know. It's that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it's effective, it works. But it's that combination of both calm and joy.
I also love your approach in that you don't have to make a page. You know, sometimes I don't go out nature journaling because, I just have a moment and I don't want to have to invest the time to make a whole journal page. But with your approach with green sketching, it's just like 5-10 minutes outside sketching on the back of an envelope or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't have to invest in it.
Yeah, so I've lost count of how many sketchbooks I have, but within each sketchbook, there's probably 20% of pages have something that I'm happy with in terms of an artistic sort of thing that I would show somebody. I like, look at this bluebell sketch, or look at this I don't know, kingfisher that I've drawn. But the rest of the sketchbook is full of memories and little notes of where I've been that create a whole other level of joy, but they're not visually pleasing to anybody else, and they probably wouldn't even make sense to anybody else. It's sort of, there's half a hawthorn leaf that I sketched while I was waiting at the bus stop. Well, not the bus stop, but, you know, waiting for something or other. And they're full of scribbles and shopping lists and to-do lists, and I love it like that. I love the fact that it's not at all precious. And if anybody wanted to know how to get started, I'd say get a good sketchbook, but not one that feels too good, because if it's too good, you'll be paralysed and you won't use it. Something that feels nice, something tactile that feels nice to hold, and just start scribbling on the first few pages so that you get over that perfectionism and fear of making mistakes, and then just start, and don't worry about creating pretty pictures, but just start noticing what you notice and making a few doodles, and lower your expectations. Expect the first few sketchbooks to just be a complete mishmash of things, and don't Google nature journaling too soon, because the images that come up are so intimidatingly beautiful. I direct everybody to your website to read the blog with all the different styles, because that was such a fantastic resource, your International Nature Journaling Week blog, because it showed the variety of approaches. Whereas if you just Google image search nature journaling, you can just think, well, I could never do that. I'm never going to be able to do that. Whereas just start making some tiny sketches first, and don't compare yourself to anyone.
Yes, comparison is huge, and art fears are huge. And when I was building that website, I thought I have to make a whole page about this because it's so important. And I made a page called For the Reluctant Artist, because it's so huge. It is the biggest barrier, I find. And you're right, because people don't post their personal doodles online because it's a visual medium, and so you don't see the hundreds of little sketches that people do. And so then you can think, oh no, I can't do this, you have to be perfect to do it. And I totally agree.
It's a hard one to break, isn't it? Because we're all saying the same thing. Everybody I know who does something in this area says exactly the same thing, and yet what we put out, myself included, we tend to edit what we're sharing, because we want to share the pretty things. So maybe we need to have a agreement that Monday is for our rubbish doodles, and everybody across the whole community
that's a great idea.
shares the scrappy stuff on Monday or something.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was actually looking back through my old nature journals, the one I started first, and I was really interested and a bit shocked that how much my style had changed. And in the beginning, I was doing a lot of writing. Most of my page was writing, and I had a little sketch, but it was really deep personal reflective writing. And I realized that since sort of posting my work online, my whole style has completely changed, and I think it's less, it's definitely more focused on images and less personal reflection, and it made me feel like, oh, I have to move back towards that because the habit of posting online has changed my style.
No, I think you have to be aware. It's a hard one in your role. The more you're becoming an advocate, the more people are going to be enjoying and scrutinising what you're putting out there. But it's totally natural and almost unavoidable to then start self-censoring yourself. And
yes,
the very reason you started nature journaling and those sort of personal deep feelings, you're not going to want to put them on Instagram. You're not going to want to share them. So,
yeah, that's right.
It's a tricky one. It's something I juggle with a lot. So trying to work out how to get the balance right.
You made a post on Instagram, and it was one of those posts where people sort of put a bit of themselves out there to let their followers get to know them, and it was 12 interesting facts about you, and there was 3 of these that I want to talk about. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So the first one is that you're a qualified colour consultant. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So in Switzerland, after I decided that I was going to take a break from being a sciencey person, and when I was rediscovering my love of colour and creativity, I trained as a colour consultant.
Wow.
And absolutely loved it. It was just, I live and breathe colour. I love colour. The trouble is I have zero interest in fashion, so I was never ever going to take it any further professionally. But the process of understanding colour and how colour makes people feel happy and what colours people light them up and everything was a fantastic training to do. It's a string to my bow.
Yeah. But it comes through in your work. I can absolutely see it. And when I didn't know this about you until I read it, but I did know that colour is really important to you. And you do these beautiful landscape drawings. And really, it's just a stack or like a...
Yeah, of colour.
Like colour stratum. Yeah, like you just look at the landscape and you do the deep green of the horizon, and then you do the different like mixing and melding and gradations of green in a landscape. And I just love this, and colour is completely present in those landscapes.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable with colour. I love colour, and those landscape layers are interesting because I never sort of thought them through before. They sort of just happened. They just sort of came out of my hand, if that makes sense. But there's a common thread that there's like the strata, and you wonder if there's some subliminal geological strata, strata going in there. But no, it was interesting you picked up on that. So.
Another fact about you is that you've been in a bird hide with David Attenborough. Can you tell this story?
Yeah, so I was working as a climate change advisor in a water company, and he had a connection with the reservoir, the local reservoir, and was opening a reservoir extension for the purpose of wildlife as a climate change adaptation measure. And I was invited along to the sort of VIP day and got to have lunch with him, with many other people, but got to have lunch with him, had a very quick chat with him about climate change. And afterwards, we went down to a bird hide, and I found myself stood next to David Attenborough in a bird hide, just trying not to hyperventilate.
Yeah, amazing.
And he was an absolute gentleman. He had so much time for everyone, and as much of a living legend as everyone hopes he'd be. So it was a treasured memory.
Yeah, that is super cool. And the third one I want to talk about is that you say that you were in your 40s when you realised that being sensitive was a superpower as much as a weakness. And I just love this because I'm a highly sensitive person myself, and I wanted to talk about that. I wonder if you feel like your sensitivity helps you in your work when you're running a Boggy Doodles session.
I think it helps in lots of different ways, actually. I grew up believing and sometimes being told that sensitivity was a weakness. You know, you're too sensitive, you're oversensitive. But as I got a bit wiser, I realised that sensitivity is very closely linked with perceptiveness, and that perhaps my ability to observe details and notice things was linked to that sensitivity. It was a sensitivity to my environment. And there's a sensitivity to people's emotions, and you can pick up on that when you're working with people and helping people. But interestingly, there's also research that says the more moved you are by nature's beauty, for example, the deeper your connection will be. So actually it's an asset, because you can develop a much closer, deeper relationship with nature because you are sensitive than if you weren't. So it's something I've learned to love now rather than feel ashamed of, which so if anyone's feeling sensitivity as a weakness, then I'd strongly encourage them to have a rethink. It is a superpower.
Yeah. Did you read Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person?
Yes, I did. Yes.
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 Yeah, that transformed my way of thinking about sensitivity as well.
I wish schools were a little bit more aware of it too, because I think it's poorly understood. It's poorly understood, and I want to champion sensitivity and champion quiet people and champion introversion. So yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, and for the work you do, bringing joy to the community and nature connection to people who haven't had it before. Thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you, Bethan, and thank you for welcoming me into the nature journaling community, even though I'm slightly one foot in, one foot out. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're amazing. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ali. Please take the time to visit the show notes, where you'll find links to Ali's website, her TEDx talk, and her social media accounts. Big hugs to all the sensitive introverts out there. With Ali as inspiration, we can do anything. See you next week.